One of the really cool things that came out of that research with the people who had attempted suicide and really hadn't had a plan to do that was essentially an intervention for what to do. We call it what to do if you have an overwhelming urge to suicide, if that urge comes on. We think about it much the same way that we think about fires, physical fires. So for a physical fire, you can do fire prevention. You can be in an area that's a high fire risk and you can do fire prevention. You could be in a fire, so you could be in a hotel where there's a fire happening, you're in a fire, and that's where fire extinguishers and 911 come in. Or you can be, worst case scenario, you can be on fire physically. And we know when you're on fire physically, it's the stop, drop, and roll that is so critical to success. It's very basic. That's the stop, drop, and roll. And it has to be something you know ahead of time, because if none of us were trained in stop, drop, and roll, we wouldn't know what to do if we were in a kitchen fire and our shirt caught on fire. But it's been drilled into us from when we were kids. And it turns out far more people are dying of suicide than are dying in fires. And of the people who die by suicide, we suspect a large number of them had no plans to kill themselves until shortly before their suicide. Essentially, they became on fire emotionally. They became on fire emotionally, but they didn't have a stop, drop, and roll. Maybe they knew of 911, but the thought did not even enter their mind to call 911, just like it wouldn't make sense to call 911 when you were on fire physically. You need a stop, drop, and roll. So I surveyed a whole bunch of people to say, what would it be? What would a stop, drop, and roll be for an emotional fire where suicidal thoughts came on the table? And what we came up with was something to address that emotional intensity people were describing, where their physiology, their emotions were so hot that they could no longer think clearly. And then we came up with instructions for what not to do and for how to get to safety. And so the stop, drop, and roll currently, as informed by people with lived experience, crisis response workers, psychologists, emotion experts, is that if you have that overwhelming urge to suicide or use drugs or alcohol, and that's dangerous for you, that you would shut that emotion down, shut your physiology down, and that would be with cold water or with sleep. So if you can sleep, sleep. Otherwise, use cold water, put your face in cold water. What we know is that rapidly changes your physiology and your emotionality. And it's working with your vagal nerve or your vagus nerve and eliciting the mammalian dive response. So that's your that's your drop. You're dropping your face into cold water. And there's a video on Now Matters Now under the crisis help tab, which is on the top right hand corner, that describes these steps. The second step is make no important decisions, especially deciding to die. Make no important decisions. Wait 24 to 48 hours, because what we know is that intense suicidal crises usually resolve in that period of time. But if you don't know that, you think it's going to be like this forever, it's harder to survive. But if you know, oh, this is part of it, they told me this would happen, then it seems more manageable, because you know it will change, it will end. It won't be perfect, but it won't be as intense. And then the last step currently in our stop, drop, and roll for overwhelming emotional fire, for being on fire emotionally, is to make eye contact. Because eye contact is a powerful pain reliever. It's also a really powerful stimuli that can help drag someone out of their emotional, internal pain and suffering and get you in the presence of another person. So step 3 is to find someone and ask them to get them out of their head. So can you help me get out of my head? That ideally is in person, but that can be somebody over Messenger, over video chat. That can even be a pet. For some people, it could be a photo where you're connecting with somebody's eyes, something that's more strong than the thoughts you're having, or at least strong, so that you have a fighting chance of getting outside of your brain, because it's so powerful. Those, for people who describe it, those, it's so all encompassing. You need something really strong. So the stop, drop, and roll for overwhelming urges to kill oneself or to use substances when that's very dangerous is to use cold water or sleep, to make no important decisions and not panic, and last but not least, to make eye contact, to get in the presence of another being, ideally one that you trust.